Greetings, Lions fans. Welcome back to the mental health edition of the Detroit Lions podcast. I am Jeff Widenhofer, your host. I am a licensed mental health professional. I am a long-time Lions fan, an ex-military guy. Today I work for the federal government as a psychotherapist, a mental health counselor. Everything I say here is my own opinion. It does not reflect the policies or viewpoints of any federal department or government agency. I have to say all that stuff. Here we go, though. Let's get back into it, okay? If you're new, if this is the first time you're hearing this, and you're unsure what's happening, why is there a mental health edition? We're talking about sports. I say exactly, right? There's a lot of reasons to, I don't know, it's interesting, it's insightful. Maybe it can change some things, maybe it cannot, maybe it will not, but it's interesting at least. Okay, so I encourage you to check out that first episode if you're unsure why I'm doing this. I talked about it quite a bit. And I'm going to continue some discussions from the other episode. This is the fourth and final episode of what I'm going to do here. And I want to say this too, please rate, like, and subscribe to the Detroit Lions podcast on whatever platform you are viewing this in, viewing or listening, because it does help Chris and these other fine people bring this high quality, hopefully this is high quality content. I know the other content is high quality content, keeps bringing it to us. Okay. And as far as mental health discussions, I would love to continue some of these discussions here. And, but I want to know, I'm curious how it lands with you all. If you don't need it, if you don't like it, let us know. If it doesn't apply, then that's fine. And, let us know. But if you do appreciate something about it, or you have some thoughtful comments about how to improve it, yes, please. I want to hear that. On the Slack chat, I am Jeff. I think it's got some title. I'm not on there too often. I'm usually just reading it. I'm not involved, but I could get more involved. It says Mental Health Lion, I think, somewhere in my title. I don't know. I do want to share this as I get going into this fourth and final episode. Okay, the first episode was Everything Has Changed. I talked about that. Episode 2 was I talked about change in the Lions organization. Episode 3 is changes in us Lions fans. Today, I'm talking about identity. And I want to talk about the concept of reverting and progress. I want to talk about stress, the stress response in the NFL fan. And I finally want to just kind of close all this with some reminders of how the Lions are elite and how that can help us, how that can change us in good ways. So as I get into this, I told you the first episode, I listened to a lot of national podcasts, national NFL podcasts. It is true, I do. This week I heard Michael Lombardi. He's got the GM shuffle. He's worked at different places. He has worked under Belichick. He has worked under the Raiders, kind of front office kind of stuff. And he's involved in national discussion, and he's brought on other podcasts. He has said many times he's really interested and he likes to study leadership and how it applies to NFL organizations. So he has those discussions on his podcast and other places quite often. But one thing he said, and one I listened to just a few days ago, was this. He said, championship teams ask the question, who are we? I dig that, man, because he's making this point because it might be an indicator of progress and success for many organizations, right? A strong identity that is thoughtfully crafted and pursued. Now I guess that's one thing that I've been talking about through these 4 episodes, because maybe championship fan bases also can ask the question, who are we? What is our identity? Our organization, our favorite football organization, the Lions, Brad Holmes, everyone that works under him, the ownership, the coaches, they have asked this question many times. You can see it, right? They have an identity. They tell us about it all the time. Very cool stuff, but when we ask the question, who are we? We're asking kind of, what do we want to be, first of all? Where are we? How do we get there? But it's a strange question because a lot of us just were not taught to go through life asking questions like this. A lot of us were taught to just go through life and that's how it is, right? and never really contemplate or examine anything. But what, those of us who work in mental health are keenly aware of is that we can and we do affect our life experiences. We do this in positive ways. We do this in neutral ways, and we do this in negative ways. And we have some say in how much of the negative stuff and the positive stuff is happening. We have some say in that, okay? And as all of you know, we have gone through some shitty times as Lions fans. But today, as we look around, everything has changed. And we have an opportunity to change ourselves. As a community, as individuals a little bit, sure, yeah, along with these external circumstances. So this first section here I'm talking about, I'm calling it reversion, which is kind of I might have made that word up. I'm talking about the concept of reverting. And what the the dictionaries and definitions say about reverting is it means going back to a previous state. I'm hoping some of you can follow along where I'm going with this right now. Reverting, right? Reverting to a previous state, Lions fans, it's one thing I've talked about quite a bit in these first few episodes. We are constantly going through change processes, physical changes, right? As we get older, mental changes, emotional changes. That's what we are. We're human, so we're going through those changes. And when it comes to difficult experiences, really, painful, hurtful, challenging experiences, I don't know that we ever fully recover or heal. That's up for debate. But maybe we can partially recover and heal. But it goes to show if we are only partially recovered, then that means we still might go backwards sometimes. We might revert to a previous state, to previous learned behaviors, reactions, responses, thought patterns, okay? And so in mental health, we talk about recovery a lot. We should, right? We don't go to therapists just because it's nice to have a friend. That's not what these relationships are necessarily. These are clinical relationships. So hopefully, if you've ever gone to counseling, therapy, anything like that, you've had a discussion about what does it mean to recover? What's it going to look like for you? How do we get there? These are great discussions for our lives in general, as well as in the office clinical setting. So what does it mean to recover? What does it look like? What are some signs that we're on our way? And in mental health, we call this oftentimes a treatment plan. Just like if you go to physical therapy because you have an injury or something that's some kind of functionality that's degraded, that physical therapist is going to have a treatment plan. They're going to have a goal and how to get there. Okay, but these things in mental health can be kind of abstract because we're talking about thoughts and emotions and behavior patterns. And that's a little different from the medical field and the physical therapy field, because in those fields, recovery is often identifiable. They're looking at your tissue. They're looking at your bones. They're looking at blood tests, urine tests, organ tests, strength tests, range of motion tests. We can see it. Okay. There's also a side to the medical field and probably physical therapy field that is also abstract, though. Those fields, professionals there also want to help us to feel better, right? And it's hard to measure that sometimes. We put artificial indicators into place, scale of 1 to 10. How does that feel? So in mental health, we often look to how we feel to see if we are better. And I've talked about neuroscience a few times here. What humanity and the scientific fields have learned through neuroscience, though, is that some of this stuff might be less abstract than it has been during the course of human history, because we're looking at neural pathways, we're looking at regions of the brain that activate and deactivate. And so many of our emotional experiences present in physiological ways. Someone who has anxiety will have higher heart rate, blood pressure, maybe changing organ functionality, and behaviors that can be measured too. All right, so anytime we're talking about goal setting and treatment plans in any context, we've got to be realistic, okay? If we're not setting goals that are realistic, then we're being delusional, many cases. We're not living in reality. And realistic goals often involve the acceptance that we might revert to a previous state. All right. 2 steps forward, 1 step back, maybe 1 step forward, 2 steps back sometimes. Perfection is a great concept, but often not possible. And this can be frustrating, especially when we're kind of getting used to experiencing healing and recovery and things are getting better. This is so great. And then we take a step back and not only do we take a step back, but sometimes we have negative feelings about taking a step back. Okay. So I want to talk about that in the context of the Lions fan experience. I'm going to talk about stress response and the NFL fan next. Stress response and the NFL fan. I had a great time during the 2023 season and playoff run. I had an awesome time. It was so much fun. All those wins, clinching a division title, all that success, all that recognition. But on Saturday, before that first playoff game against the Rams, something kind of turned for me, right? I think I was learning in some ways to do a little bit better, to have a little more fourth quarter confidence, for example. But before that game against the Rams, I kind of went backwards. I felt like I kind of went back towards the maybe the SOL fan, maybe somebody who's just too nervous, like just not having fun, not having as much fun. I reverted back to some of my old ways. Scared of failing, maybe, I don't know. Frustrated when I saw analysts pick the Rams because Detroit's better. All right. And I was worried. I guess some part of me was worried that all this progress was going to be wiped out here in the first playoff game, and that national media would no longer talk about my team in a positive manner. I wonder if any of you felt that way. Just all those nerves around that first game. All right. Last episode, I talked about psychology and neuroscience, and I'm going to expand into that here. I'm going to talk about stress response. We humans have a stress response that we cannot control. We can affect it, we can influence it, we can shape it, but we cannot control our stress response in many scenarios. It just happens. Our body responds, and it's primarily our brain responding and getting the system, then all the organs and all the different parts to respond accordingly to the way the brain tells it to. Okay. This stress response, though, is a good thing. It keeps us safe. It helps humanity get to this point, and the human race to stay alive and to survive, speaking in evolutionary terms there. And you will be helped by it in the future. Unfortunately, though, we also experience a lot of unnecessary, sometimes suffering, dysfunction, problems because of it, this stress response. And this is a major part of the work that I do, working with combat veterans, victims of sexual assault, victims of abuse, and people who have worked and lived in high stress, life-threatening environments, right? Their nervous systems, their stress response has been affected by those environments and those experiences. And so coming back into the real world, getting out of the military, coming back home can be challenging because the system has changed. Okay. And in this stress response, portions of our brain take over and other parts sort of power down or deactivate. So those words aren't perfect for they don't perfectly describe what's going on. You're not completely shut off, but there are different regions of your brain that now kind of own the moment. Okay. So I'm going to talk about PTSD here just for a little bit. And this is the context in which these discussions about brain activity and stress response are really important for people. But once again, let's put a separation between real suffering, real trauma response, and those disorders, and our experiences as Lions, as sports fans. Okay, there is a separation here. This is not as serious, yet some things are relatable. Okay, I started working as a mental health professional, and when I lived in Colorado, I lived in Boulder, Colorado, which, if you've ever been out there, it's northwest of Denver. It's right up against where the Rocky Mountains start. I mean, the Rocky Mountains just basically jut up from the earth at that point. It's really a beautiful place. A lot of people go hiking there. Hiking is huge in that area because it's beautiful, and there's trails all over the place. But one animal that lives out there are mountain lions. And I use this example with a lot of people, and they seem to get it. So picture yourself, you're out there hiking, okay? And you're walking along, it's a beautiful summer day, and you're out there alone, and you got enough water, and you got a granola bar, power bar, you're good to go, feeling good. And you look over to your left, and you see a mountain lion, I don't know, say 15 feet away from you, crouching and looking right at you. And it looks like it's gonna jump. What happens in that moment? Here's what happens. The image of that mountain lion gets placed on your retina, and your brain recognizes that image, and it sends signals around. And there's a certain part called, we can call it the amygdala, that takes over, in some ways. It's the amygdala is this kind of tiny portion of the brain that's in the kind of the bottom back part of your head. And it's often called the lizard brain. Why is that? It's because lizards, these species that have been around on the earth for longer than humanity maybe, also have an amygdala that functions in a very similar way. We share this with other life forms, this part of our brain. Okay? And what happens when the brain recognizes a threat? The frontal lobes up here, all this stuff up here that humans have, that not all species have developed, not nearly as much as humans at least. So that part sort of powers down, and the amygdala lights it up. And it lights up our nervous system, sends signals through our sympathetic nervous system. And here's what happens. Your heart rate's going to increase suddenly. Your airways are going to expand suddenly. Adrenaline is going to start pumping, cortisol. Your breathing's going to become a little more rapid, sort of like maybe hyperventilating, like get oxygen, get in there. Your blood sugar will increase, need for energy. And your blood sort of moves away from some surfaces, which is a sensible thing. It makes us a little less vulnerable if we're going to get into a fight, into a tussle, and be cut, and have less bleeding at that point. Also, some things that slow down digestion, and what we're not really capable of doing. What happens in these frontal lobes is logic, planning, love. Those things are sort of unreachable in those moments when we are in this stress response, survival response. You might have heard fight, flight, or freeze. There's some words that describe what happens in that moment. And what we're talking about here is the fight or the flight response. We are suddenly ready to run or ready to put up our arms and fight, and we get into postures without thinking about it. Do you see how this can be a problem when our stress response is activated? Because our brains will learn, like I talked about, combat victims, assault victims, people who have lived in life-threatening, high-stress environments. Their systems now understand the world differently. Their systems, starting with the brain and all the organs that it connects to, now have been taught that the world is less safe. Things are different. There is a good reason your brain thinks to be activated, aware, hypervigilant. All these things that we talk about when counselors work with people with PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. It's the disorder of continuing this high stress response after a traumatic event. Our brains will learn from stressful, traumatic, fearful experiences, and our brains will then operate with the understanding that this stress response condition is now where we live. This is the new normal, if you will. Get back to us Lions fans now, right? Make no mistake, y'all. We got the separation here. This is just sports fandom, but make no mistake, part of you has learned, if you've been sticking around here for a while with the Lions, over all those seasons, all those losses, all those coaching staffs. Talked about that in the last episode. I went through all of those losing records, divisional losses, draft picks that did not develop. We have learned that stress is normal. as a Lions fan. So is maybe disappointment. Okay. And maybe we have learned over the course of each game that stress is coming, going to be expected. Other team's going to take over. They're probably going to the Lions are probably going to screw something up. Okay. It's not an accident that many of you think this, nor many of you do not think this without even really any say in the matter. It's sort of just happened. But we do have a chance now to affect our response, to shape our response. Okay. I'm not diagnosing any Lions fan with PTSD. That's not what's happening here. But our brains are connected to our nervous systems, and we have learned to operate in a certain way when we watch the Lions play. That happened to me before that Rams game. I felt those nerves, man. I was not happy. I was not having a good time. So I push this subject because maybe it can help us look at ourselves and see a few of our ugly truths, right? With the follow-up intention of seeing our options. How can we improve this? We Lions fans have been hurt so many goddamn times. And how many of us have gotten into habits, conscious habits and subconscious habits that protect ourselves, right? Protect our feelings or get us ready. Let's get our system is telling us to get ready for another loss. SOL. And maybe working on ourselves, seeing all this, admitting our insecurities, and identifying those times when we revert back to those previous states. I'm saying this half jokingly, those traumatized states. Okay. Maybe by looking at all that stuff, we can help ourselves and each other enjoy these times a little bit more. That's what I want. If the Lions get back to the playoffs, I don't want to be sitting around being a worried little monster before the game all day. I want to enjoy it. I want to have fun. I want to smile. I want to feel. I want to wash it all, right? It's one reason why I love his platform here, the Detroit Lions podcast. It is a community led by Chris's positive, I think, growth mentality. It's one reason why he and Riz have kept saying Lions fans are going to have to learn to. That's what I'm getting at here. What do we answer that question with? I would say this: to be a little more positive, a little more accepting, a little less impulsive, maybe a little less negative, to have a little more perspective, a little more resilience, have a little more fun. Those are the things I think Lions fans can learn to do. And so I'm grateful for TDLP, and I know a lot of you are too, because I hear you all call in and express your gratitude, and I see it on the message boards too. Final thing I want to talk about here is how the Lions are elite and why that matters. All right, the Lions are elite. That is a fact. That is a fact right now. Everything has changed. We have watched this team, this very young team still, go through hard times. Under Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes, 3-13. And there was that time, I'm not counting that. 3-13. That's tough. And then 1-6. Awful. Not a lot of believers out there, probably. All that criticism, I'm sure you remember hearing it. I do too. National, local, all the doubt. The team being overlooked for Pro Bowl and All-Pro consideration. Right? Went from all that to winning lots and lots and lots of games and going deep into the playoffs to a conference championship that went down to the wire. And all these Pro Bowlers now and high rankings and Super Bowl odds. I listened to another national podcast this week. I listened to it yesterday, and they were going through the, I think, top 10 teams that they thought had the best young cores, 25 and under. And I was doing some busy work as I was listening to it, so I wasn't listening that closely. And they went down from 10, 9, 8, 7, all these different teams. And I didn't hear them talk about the Lions. And they finished up with 2, and I was like, oh, these mother effers, like they're not even going to mention the Lions. Well, another BS, once again, overlooked. That's what went through my mind. And then they all had the Lions as the number 1 team for talent 25 and under. I was like, oh, that's different. That's very different. Okay. The draft hosted in a city that contains an elite organization, elite ownership, front office, coaching staffs. The Lions are one example of how to build an elite team. That's not the only example of how to do that, but they are now an example of how to build an elite organization and team, right? And they have all these players now, self-motivated to improve, resilient, showing all their grit, talent. I just want to bring this up, man. Do you remember the video of Penei Sewell? I think this was in the Lions organization. It might have been like their year-end video that they had for the 2023 season. They showed Penei Sewell at the beginning of the Chiefs game. So first game of the season, first game of the NFL season. And they didn't show this on the TV broadcast at the time last September, but they show Penei yelling his face off at his guys and saying before the Chiefs game, they're in Arrowhead, lock the gates. And whatever shit he was saying after that, pumping up his guys, let's get after this. God dang, lock the gates. Like, they're all in. They are ready to compete. Brian Branch, pick 6. Oh, that game was so much fun. It was just amazing. This is elite stuff because they beat the number 1 team in the league, right, for many years in a row now, that game. Okay, so get back to the question of what is our identity? How are we at being fans of an elite organization? Are we ready for it? Are we living up to it? So I'll just ask some questions here. What are your expectations this season? Can an elite organization lose games? Ooh, can we lose a game to a team with a losing record? How many games? How many losses are acceptable? How many division losses are acceptable? How many interceptions from Jared Goff are acceptable? Right? How many of these rookies that we've got, this 2024 draft, how many of them have to start by next year or this year? All right. What if next year's draft, they take another player who is not at a quote unquote premium position? Okay. Y'all remember Brad Holmes at his post-draft press conference this year. A lot of people called it his victory lap. He was basically saying, I think what I heard him saying was, what the fuck is wrong with all you people in the media? Don't you see what we're doing? He's calling out, not everybody, but some people. Like, how can you not see this? I see it. I'm a fan. I don't have to write about it, so I've got a different relationship with the Lions organization. But he was calling out people who are still maybe reacting according to the olden days, the impulses from the olden days, right? He was calling out some of their claims, their conclusions. Catch up to what we're doing here, everybody. And he was calling out people, I think, who are often shallow in their reflection and their consideration of context, right? But he was also saying to the fan base, just like Dan Campbell has said many times, he was saying, hang in there, trust us, we are doing our work. We have strong values, we have an identity. We have a legit professional process here to choose players. We have a competent group of employees, and we have shown you success. But, it's so hard for us sometimes, and media members, to trust this team. Got to protect ourselves. We have this automatic stress response. Oh, failure's coming. So maybe the path toward healing and recovery is just being aware of when we're doing this and when we're maybe too impulsive, too protective, and too fearful of being hurt, right? Maybe when we're a little too shallow, we're jumping to conclusions, right? Be more aware when this first game rolls around and you're nervous, or I'm nervous, anxious, trying to enjoy these moments. Yes, I'm really talking about myself here. You probably have guessed that by now. I'm really kind of exercising some of the shit that's in me. That's why I wanted to do this, right? One reason. So what if they lose to the Rams in the first week? What if they lose to the Seahawks again? What if it's a close game and they lose it again? Right? What if the Bears decide that Thanksgiving game against the Lions is their Super Bowl? If we could just beat the Lions, then we can prove to the world that we're a top team. That's the mentality a lot of competitors take now that this team is elite. All right. I don't know how I'm going to fully react, but at least now I have a little more insight in how I want it to look and how I want to shape it once I notice it. And also, I'm going to bring this up. Maybe losses are okay for this team. I'm not talking about from our perspective. I'm talking from the coach's perspective. Maybe they know that some losses often help them focus, dig up a little bit more resolve when they're tired or hurt. Maybe losses help ground this organization. Okay? Maybe losses hiss off some of these ultra competitive, highly self-motivated, resilient players, right? These gritty players. Maybe it'll help them come back swinging harder in the next game, the next bunch of games, or the next play. There's something for me that's so satisfying when I watch this Lions team fall behind and then come back. God, it's awesome to see their clarity, their focus, and their very much developed, nurtured, empowered sense of resiliency and grit, right? When they start running the ball down the field, throwing it down, or the defense cranks up some pressure, God, I'm willing to embrace that more, man. And I want the belief that it will happen more, right? Because this is not unfounded hope. We've seen it happen. Maybe the ride is what we can now enjoy a little bit more. Maybe this Lions bandwagon is often rolling now. Maybe it's rolling steady. Maybe, I'm going to get a little metaphorical here, this bandwagon, is not just parked next to a nice couple of wins. Hop on, everybody. We're pretty okay. Wasn't that a nice run? Lions are cute. They went 9-8 and made Green Bay uncomfortable 2 years ago. Maybe the Lions are that light at the end of the tunnel, that freight train barreling down at the opponent each week, after wins and after losses. Maybe we got a franchise that is now ready to take us on a fun, wild ride every season. That's kind of all I got, ladies and gentlemen. That's it. Thank you so much for listening, if you did. And once again, please like, rate, and subscribe to the Detroit Lions podcast. Visit TDLP on any of these platforms that you use. Ratings really do help this organization flourish. And I think that's what you want. It's what I want. So let Chris and the other guys and me know if the mental health edition is a good thing and if we can do more and what it might look like too. I really like doing this stuff. It's been my pleasure. And like I said at the beginning of episode 1, hopefully this was entertaining and insightful. Hopefully some of these discussions can help us as individuals and as a fan base get over some of the dysfunctional, problematic stress response habits from the past, because you know who said it. We've had enough of that shit. Let's go Lions.